All right, everyone, as I promised, here is just a little video on color harmony. And I was just going to start here with a couple of these little handouts. I hand out this piece in all my workshops. So if you've had one of my workshops, you're probably rolling your eyes right now saying, oh God, not that. And this is just a little color wheel that kind of helps explain some of these. So I think it's just a good idea that we're all on the same page with this. And I've just hit this really quick, not to bore you too much with it, but it's just the idea that our pure colors are on the outside of the color wheel. When you have yellow and violet and you mix them together, they just neutralize each other. And in a kind of an illustrative manner, I mean, I know you all knew that, but to illustrate that, what's going on there, they're coming to the center. So they're gray. When they mix together, they gray each other down. That's kind of what these are showing. So you can see like they've taken green here in this example, and as you're mixing kind of this red purple together, you're just coming to this neutral. And then I always like this because in the workshops we try to use these terms, and it's these right here. It's the value. Obviously the value is white to black, and the hue is the specific color or the family, blue. So that blue, that's a hue, if you guys can see that right there. And then chroma is how intense. So, and I love this because it's in the center here, it has a low chroma. And as you come to the outside of the wheel, it has a high chroma. So, and then also when you mix white into a mixture of say tube color, that's called a tint. So you raise this up, you're adding more and more white to any of these colors. You're now up here, and that's called a tint. And when you're adding black to that's in that same manner to these colors, so your circle's kind of down here, you're pushing it down with black, that's called a shade. So I think it's just a good idea that we're all on kind of the same page with some of that terminology. Let's pull this one in. This is a great one. So this is where we get talking a little bit more about harmony. When you have something like this, you could say, oh, and then that's one thing I wanted to mention too. I have this sheet here. I think maybe if you've seen this online, and it's on handprint.com. That's where you go to get this. So this kind of shows you, this is our kind of like our scientific color wheel, and then someone has taken this and kind of estimated, I think, about where our actual pigments that come from our tubes, a pigment such as like ultramarine blue. Let's see, where's ultramarine blue? That's right here. So, and we know that everyone's ultramarine blue is a little bit different. So that's why I say kind of approximate, because they can move around, but that's about where your ultramarine blue is going to be. So this is where we're kind of going to come in and learn some ways of limiting our palette, as opposed to maybe something like this where we can have every color under the sun. And I'll show you guys this really quick too. This is something that I make the college students do when I teach a local college here. And that is, we just make our own color wheels. And in this color wheel, they had primary and secondary tube colors, I believe. And then they just had to mix their tertiary colors with those. And then this is one I wanted to show them, where each one of these colors, I can show you this, each one of these represents a tube color. And so I don't know why, I kind of went a little crazy, and I went and found the best that I could colors that were complementary with each other, and that's primary, secondary, and tertiary colors. So all of those are tube colors. So for example, this is a turquoise blue from Rembrandt, and I found that neutralized itself really well against this M-gram cad red light, and it went through all those. So that was, that's just an exercise. So what we're trying to get away from is basically having all those colors. So we're going the opposite direction here. And that's kind of where this sheet comes in. This is another thing I always hand out at my workshops, and I'll post this one on Patreon so you guys can download it. See if I can figure out how to do a PDF or something on there of this. And so this just shows you, limiting your palette, and that takes in this color wheel basically. So that's what we have here. So just an example, like a monochromatic piece. We all know what a monochromatic piece is, I think. It's just where you have one color. Oh, and then this wouldn't include white. As an oil painter, we need white. So it's white and one of these colors. So in this case, you just choose one color, and you have that color in white, and you paint your entire painting with that. That's a really, I make all my college students do that. That's one of our musts that we do. And then over here, you just add more color to it. So I think this was an interesting one. This is called I don't know if you guys can see that. This is a direct complement. And you just pick a complementary pair, and that can be any pair you want. It can be yellow and purple or red and green. This is they calling a split complement, and we have all these down here. So come clear down here. We'll kind of skip over those for now. But here's the triad. So here's what you hear a lot. Here's your three primers basically. So there'd be yellow, red, and blue, and that's a pretty common. And this is an interesting one. This is tetrad, where you kind of got four across from each other. And you kind of go back to this a little bit. That's kind of what we're doing here, is you just pick four of those tube colors that are kind of in those areas from each other. I don't know if that quite fits that, but it's probably pretty close. Maybe not quite exactly. So this one here, this near complement's kind of interesting. So if this were yellow and blue, you could see you get some pretty good, yellow and blues and greens in there, but you wouldn't really get any violets or reds, oranges even, at all. So your painting would be very skewed over to that one analogous area. And that's a good way to kind of start working with atmosphere. If you're painting paintings late in the evening or in the morning, and you want to give them a mood or a feel, that's a good way to do it. And we're kind of doing the same thing with this one. I think these two are probably basically the same thing here. And I had all my students do this one. This was a fun one. This is analogous, so you just pick four analogous colors. Those are colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. Then you get one complementary color. And that was amazing what we could get out of that. And then, of course, in class, we would just put all these up on the wall and look at the different feel or mood that each one of these color schemes would give their paintings. And so you learn a lot about color when you start limiting. And I always tell my students that too. When you begin to limit yourself, take something away, that is really when you begin to learn. And we're just talking more about pigments. You have heard this mentioned, the Zorn palette. This Zorn palette is a limited palette. So when you use the Zorn palette, you get automatic color harmony. And it's such a strange palette, and you think it's not going to work, but it's surprising what you can get out of this. Now it's a very muted palette. You don't get any bright colors. If you find yourself, you just say, well, yeah, but I'm a colorist. I just love color. I'm not saying you have to paint with this the rest of your life, but even if you're a colorist, give this a try. Give it a try and see what you think. And you may come back and say, I'll never do that again. But I would bet you're going to say, oh my, I learned tons from that. So when you have the Zorn palette, what you're not getting here is a bright yellow. So you're just mixing the yellow and the black together to get your green. Now, black in this palette represents blue. So you're getting a green here is what you're getting. And I know that doesn't look green at all, mostly because it's on kind of a green background. And when I say green, I do want you guys to realize that it's gray. We're really working with a lot of grays here. You see those Zorn paintings, they are just absolutely gorgeous. But they're not Sorolla paintings either. They're not paintings that are on the beach in Spain. So, but I would think that Sorolla could use this palette and make it sing. So, all right, then the black, basically the black and the red make a beautiful violet. That's a really nice violet. It makes your dark. So there's your violet. Just add a little bit of white to it so you guys can see into that what it's doing. So there's your violet. Leans probably a little to the red, but all you have to do is just put a little bit more black back in that. Black, again, black being, whoops, that was a little much. Black being blue. So let's push that back into the blues just a little bit. There we go. So there's a little bit better violet. And you're asking yourself, yeah, but what about blue? Well, that is just simply black and white. That makes your blue. And if you look at that, and you start comparing, but you can kind of see that it's just black and white. So in relative terms, remember, I think that's the thing that you always have to remember. Everything's relative to each other. If you put in a phthalo say, oh, I want to put in a phthalo green or phthalo blue in this, that would completely ruin the relativeness of this palette. And you can see we're just going to mix up a little pile here of orange. So they work in harmony with each other. And there, I tell you, every color is in here. Every time, I make almost all of my workshops, I make my students do this palette at least one day. And I think across the board they all start off. It's a little clunky and a little unusual, but by the end of the day, they're pretty amazed at what you can do with it. It's surprisingly versatile. You can get a nice pink just by the, well, let's see, let's try that one more time. Let's take the black out of that. And you can see you can get a nice pink out of that. It may not be the best palette if you are painting flowers, but you could try it anyway. See what you could do with flowers. Now you can kind of see that really is green. It's very muted. It's at best it's like an army green, but it's green. When you get putting all these colors next to each other, they really start to work. And you work like a flesh tone, kind of like a lighter Caucasian flesh tone. That's just right there. That's all it is. And you can put a little bit of blue or violet in that, and you got it. So I would highly recommend trying this palette right here. And this is basically it's all we're doing different than these. These are just kind of like scientific ideas, but this one is here, but you're using muted colors. Like yellow ochre is obviously not cad yellow light, so you're not going to get a high chroma color from that. It's a very low chroma color. So let me clean this up, and then I'm going to squeeze out one more kind of palette that I've been using a lot lately. Okay, with this palette, this is another one that's going to give you great harmony, but with this palette, it's going to give you a little more chromatic variations going. You're going to get a little stronger color. That Zorn palette is very muted. There's no if and or buts about that. You don't get a lot of bright color out of that, but it has gorgeous color harmony. This one also has gorgeous color harmony, but you just get a little stronger color out of it. So that's ultramarine blue. You guys saw this on the first video I did, and I'm going to be doing on a lot of them. That right there, let's see, let's put that right there. That's cad yellow light. That is upside down. And this is my alizarin crimson, and so my red is represented with a brown. And that's kind of the big difference here in this palette, is we've taken the red off. And if you are playing around with those color harmonies, you could replace that with cad red light. Now that's been my palette. So there you are right there. There's your triad. So there's cad yellow light, there's cad red light, or you probably a medium would be a little bit better. I would probably replace that with like a Perylene or a cad red medium, and then your ultramarine. So there's your triad right there. But in this case, trying this strange little thing with transparent earth red. So what you get with that, let's get these out of the way. And we might need a little more white here. So obviously with this one you get a much stronger green. But that's, I think if you have a Viridian or even a phthalo on your palette and your greens are just too intense, this would be a great one to really just pull that back and mix your greens from those two colors. So that's very common. I think a lot of palettes use those two colors to make their greens. There's nothing unusual about that. And obviously you're getting a very nice violet out of this. You can see in there, and obviously you can tweak that to the red or the blue very, very easily. And to get a black out of this one, really you can just mix that color and that blue right there, and they make a gorgeous black. And then putting a little bit more of the brown in that makes it a warm black. By putting a little bit more blue in there, you get a cool black. So there's your black. And see if you it's a beautiful neutral too. Let me put a little bit of white in that for you. You can see that it is gray. And there it's just a gorgeous gray. Beautiful grays, beautiful grays. And this is just makes kind of a, now this part of this palette, and I think that's why I've kind of picked up on this lately, is I think I just wanted to subdue my reds for a while. So this is just going to give us a red, but you can see it's, you know, that's pretty strong. It's a nice red. There's nothing really dead about that. That's a beautiful red. And then the last one, our last secondary color here, is obviously orange. And it gives you a pretty good orange. So it's, you know, other than this cad yellow light, this is also a pretty inexpensive palette. Actually, both these palettes are inexpensive. And if you're limiting yourself down to colors like this, you'll actually save a lot of money. You won't have to buy all those expensive pigments. But the cad yellow light can be a little expensive. But you know, if you really want to save money, you can replace that. Here's two colors. Here's a Hansa yellow, and this is a Michael Harding. This is a Yellow Lake. So they're not as opaque and maybe as strong as the cad yellow light, but they would work, and they're actually quite inexpensive. So that would make that entire palette not, I guess that was kind of an expensive color, but you don't have to use that one. Just use any alizarin crimson. That's fine. I mean, they're not permanent, but or you can find like Gamblin has an alizarin crimson permanent that's pretty affordable. So basically, this is when I talk about color harmony, this is exactly what we're talking about. And in a nutshell, the easiest way to do it is just to limit your color choices. So I've decided to break this video into two halves because it's kind of just a lot of information in one. And the second half of the video, I want to talk about a thing called gamut mapping. If you've had a workshop from me where we've done that, you're probably thinking, oh God, no gamut mapping. But it's actually very, very cool. So the idea with gamut mapping is it's the same idea we just did, but it's another way to get a limited palette. So we just have a color wheel that I hand out to all the students, and then I hand them, in this case we stick with the triad. Now you guys remember the triad, right? The triad is just this right here, so it makes a triangle. Okay, that's basically yellow, red, and blue, and that's kind of what we have here. So what you do with this is, and the cool thing about this is you can move this around anywhere you want on that. And these can be any shape. You can change the shape to match any of those color schemes. You know, it can be any shape you want to fit any of those. But we chose this one because it's the easiest one to do. But for example, you could put that right there, and then what you end up doing is you have to mix each one of those colors. So now in this case, if that were about right there, you wouldn't have to mix that color. All you'd have to do is use yellow ochre. Because that's, you know, when your cad yellow light is clear up here, it's very intense, but yellow ochre sometimes can lean, oh, I don't know, sometimes it can lean a little bit to the yellow, but I've seen them also lean a little bit to the green, so it just depends on the yellow ochre you have. But, you know, if you put that right there, you just use yellow ochre, and then you'd have to mix up a little bit of maybe a smoky red, that's fairly strong, and then maybe a toned down blue. So we pre-mix these piles of paint. And then those pre-mixed piles of paint, that's all you get. You use those colors and paint your painting from those. So the interesting thing about this, though, is you can really, you know, we talked about maybe, that's, you know, that kind of fits like this idea, where you have the near complement, and you don't have any of these colors over here. But you're taking this triad, and you're kind of making it do a little bit what that does by moving it over. And you can make this triangle, if you really want to challenge, you make the triangle even smaller. So so in this case, you know, you might get a strong, that's a really hard one to do. So, you know, maybe a little bit of a yellowish green, and you could even get a strong, now you're into a secondary color there. But your red is just gray. You don't get any red. So you're mixing this smoky red into your palette. So your entire palette is going to be in this range. You're not going to get any of these colors. And so that's how you get mood and atmosphere into your work. So if you were to go out late in the afternoon or early in the morning and paint that light, that's a good way to just say, you know, those are the colors that I want to use here, and I don't want those other colors influencing me. I really want the mood of that late afternoon light. But anyway, I think that's probably about it, you guys. I think that's all we're going to do. I just want to talk a little bit about that. So what I'd like you guys to take away from this video is just to try a limited palette. Just, take all those colors off your palette or get another palette and give them a try. You can, just try that one I've been working with, see what you think. But really, if you want a challenge, try that Zorn palette. Get those colors out. If you've never done the Zorn palette, I think you need to treat yourself to it. And you're going to be a little frustrated in the beginning, but if you stick with it just a little bit, you'll begin to see what it has going for it. And I'll post this up on Patreon, probably a PDF or something, so you guys can download that so you have that. Just want to experiment a little bit, pick one of these and paint something. You can paint it from life or you can paint it from a photograph. It doesn't really matter. So anyway, I would highly recommend some of that. And that, just by doing those things, you will add a lot of harmony to your work. So let me know if you have any questions on that, or if you have some success or failures, just go ahead and message me. All right, thank you guys.